Kyiv has proven its long-range strike capability can reach deep behind enemy lines. By targeting these large logistic nodes, Ukraine is turning up the pain for Russia's middle class. It is bringing the fight home. It is destroying Russia's ability to launch attacks against Ukraine. This is a fantastic tactic. Wars are decided not just on the battlefield. Strikes thousands of kilometers from the front line can determine the victor. Let's look at the operational level of this war now. So forget holding the line. The Security Service of Ukraine, the SBU, unleashed a kinetic storm deep behind enemy lines. Signed off directly by Vladimir Zelensky, this 40-day strategic blitz slammed energy facilities, airbase hangars, and shadow fleet oil tankers across Russia and into the Sea of Azov and into the Black Sea. The objective was simple: collapse the front line from the rear. By systematically strangling the Kremlin's economy and knocking out irreplaceable strategic assets, Kyiv is cutting off frontline combat power and accelerating Putin's decline. Here's how this 40-day campaign unfolded on the ground. First of all, satellite and drone footage showing smoke rising over massive Omsk oil processing complex in Siberia. Look at the distance of this strike. Ukrainian drones flew for more than 12 hours to reach Omsk in Siberia. Siberia is the other side of the Ural Mountains. At 1,800 miles from the border, this 1,500-mile flight path is equivalent to 3 trips across the length of Great Britain. The attack halted operations at Russia's largest fuel producer, deepening domestic shortages and forcing export bans. It proves to Moscow that industrial sites, once protected by sheer distance, now sit directly in Kyiv's crosshairs. The Ural Mountains, that sort of distance, was during the Cold War with Russia or with the Soviet Union. By NATO, it was seen as the limit of our exploitation, the furthest our aircraft, our missiles and everything else could get to. Ukrainians are showing they can go well beyond that now. Zelensky confirmed the shift, stating Ukraine has completely eliminated the concept of a safe Russian strategic rear. And that strategic rear, as I said, during the Cold War was built up on the eastern side of the Ural Mountains. That is where Russia had its depots for all of its spare military equipment. That's where Russia stored its long-range missiles and ammunition before bringing it forward to what would have been a Cold War frontline. That's where Russia has a lot of its defense industrial base. That's where Russia has a lot of its oil refining and other capabilities to be able to supply things forward. It's now lost that protection of those Ural Mountains. Ukraine is showing that everywhere is touchable and nowhere is untouchable. Again, if we go back in history and we look at how Russia has defended itself. Let's go to the Second World War. Russia drew the German forces through Ukraine, right up to the outskirts of Moscow, bringing them forward fast so that the logistic lines were being stretched too far. Remember, logistics. What is Ukraine doing? Ukraine is attacking Russia's logistics, but attacking it from within Russia to stop it being able to reinforce logistically into its occupied territories inside Ukraine, stopping the logistics from keeping Russia moving normally and affecting everything. Ukraine is taking the tactics that the old Soviet Union used of slash and burn and applying that slash and burn into Russian territory. This is something they have never seen before. So, second strike, repeated drone strikes slammed into the Moscow oil refinery at Kapotynya, less than 10 miles from the Kremlin. Ukrainian drone hits the complex in multiple waves, knocking out major production lines. A UFO was spotted as the lid was blown off an oil tank. Video captured a Russian surface-to-air missile meant to take out an overhead Ukrainian drone miss and fly directly into one of the refinery storage tanks, causing a powerful blast that launched the circular roof into the sky in a mushroom cloud before it crashed to the ground, giving that impression of a UFO taking off. It was quite a spectacular sight to see. The damage directly worsened Russia's mounting domestic fuel crisis, bringing flames to the capital skyline, and it shatters Putin's claims that the war remains far away. The third example is hundreds of miles inside Russia. Ukrainian drones penetrated deep air defences to strike the Engels airbase. Satellite imagery reveals the scorched wreckage of a destroyed Tu-95MS heavy bomber. These strategic bombers represent Russia's airborne nuclear triad and are entirely irreplaceable. Losing a nuclear-capable aircraft directly on its home runway is a massive tactical humiliation for Moscow. Ukrainian naval drones targeted the sanctioned Shadow Fleet tanker Blue near Yalta, hitting Putin's illegal oil exports. By knocking out over 40% of Russia's oil refining capacity, Kyiv has proven its long-range strike capability can reach deep behind enemy lines. And it's this balance of hitting military targets, the airfields, hitting targets that are supporting military operations, the oil refineries, but also supporting civilian oil and gas supply is significant. It is bringing the fight home. It is destroying Russia's ability to launch attacks against Ukraine. It is destroying Russia's ability to reinforce or resupply its troops that are attacking into Ukraine. This is a slow tactic at the operational level to help what is going on at a tactical level and will help reinforce Ukraine's green shoots of success of Ukraine beginning to wrestle the initiative at that level. Another airbase was targeted. This time forces from the 15th Artillery Reconnaissance Brigade targeted Kalino airfield in the Kursk region. Overhead footage shows a strike drone diving directly beside a parked MiG-29 fighter jet. Moscow deploys these £20 million jets specifically to hunt down Ukrainian long-range attack drones. Ukrainian assets also knocked out the Pantsir S-1 air defence system guarding the airfield. It didn't see them coming. And this is blinding local air defence coverage and it leaves high-value targets across the region wide open to follow up strikes. On the naval front, what's this footage from a Ukrainian Mamai naval drone operating in the Black Sea? Russian helicopters throw heavy machine gun fire and aerial bombs at the drone on its approach. The pilot weaves through the defensive barrage and rams straight into a Sumax-class tanker. This vessel belonged to Putin's illegal Shadow Fleet, moving crude oil past Western sanctions to fund the war. Damaging the ship directly chokes off a critical financial pipeline feeding the Kremlin war chest. Next, to pull off these deep strikes, you have to blind the enemy first. Look at this precision strike taking out strategic radar installations in occupied Crimea. Once those radar eyes are darkened, Ukrainian forces smashed the Begravno airbase and blew up a massive ammunition depots nearby. Without air defence coverage, Russian repair hubs and supply lines in the south were left totally defenceless. This initial operation of destroying air defences is called SIAD, suppression of enemy air defences. Blind the enemy, stop them being able to attack your air assets, and you then bring the strike assets in that carry out the effect that you want to on the ground. But these air defence assets are hugely valuable and take many years to build if Russia's got the capacity to rebuild them because it can't get the key components because of the sanctions that it faces. This is a fantastic tactic by the Ukrainians to completely degrade Russia's air defences over a wide area. In this next clip, Ukrainian assets hit 4 critical military transport ferries, including the Yasek and the Maria, and incinerated the fuel terminal at the port of Kravats. By neutralising these transport ferries and knocking out the radar network across Crimea, Ukraine has effectively converted the Black Sea into a logistics death trap. Russian forces on the front line are now facing acute supply shortages. And lastly, we have the warehouses that Russian consumers rely on for their goods. By targeting these large logistic nodes, Ukraine is turning up the pain for Russia's middle class, who have so far been unaffected by the war. So what we're seeing here is a fundamental shift in strategy. Ukraine is using high-tech precision tools and relentless asymmetric tactics to hit Russia where it hurts most. Its war chest and its supply lines. When you take out nuclear bombers on their own runways and you burn tankers financing the invasion, you render the Kremlin's fortified rear completely useless. And this is the perfect example of how Ukraine has the initiative and is developing that initiative at the operational level. that operational level, stopping Russia's ability to continue to reinforce what Russian troops are trying to achieve at a tactical level. It's impacting Russia tactically, and Ukraine is now having more successes in the front line. This is where measuring what is happening in the front line is not the way to measure who is winning or losing a war. At the moment, Ukraine has got the initiative just tactically at the front line. It has definitely got the initiative operationally, and strategically, I think we're in a bit of a stalemate because we're not hearing much out of the Russians wanting peace, out of the Americans trying to force peace, and President Zelensky keeps offering to sit down in anywhere but Moscow, because apparently Moscow is a little bit too dangerous. It's got too many Ukrainian drones over it. On July the 21st, Alexander Syrsky stepped down as Commander-in-Chief of Ukraine's armed forces. Taking the helm is the 43-year-old Major General Mikhailo Drapati. He's moved up from Commander of Joint Forces. His legendary frontline status goes back to 2014 during the early battles in Mariupol. Leading a column of 72nd Mechanized Brigade armour to rescue trapped police officers, Drapati shouted "Go" to his driver. The driver floored the accelerator and launched their 18-ton BMP fighting vehicle clean over a metre-high barricade built by pro-Russian separatists. Footage of that flying BMP became an instant symbol of Ukrainian courage and resistance. Over a decade later, the married father of two takes full command of the military. Drapati is widely supported by frontline soldiers, veterans and government officials, and the public. He is known for speaking openly and taking personal responsibility in tough situations rather than chasing political standing. In 2022, Drapati led the forces that halted Russia's advance on Kryvyi Rih before liberating the west bank of Kherson. Last year, he stopped Moscow's cross-border offensive in Kharkiv, trapping Russian forces in 2 small buffer zones. And Drapati is also the primary architect of Ukraine's drone line doctrine. This strategy creates a continuous 15-kilometre kill zone behind the front line using uncrewed systems. With up to 90% of frontline defence relying on the drones, his mission is clear: defeat Russia's autumn campaign using rapid battlefield innovation. Now there's talk of Drapati's predecessor Syrsky being sacked and his predecessor Zaluzhny being sacked. This war's been going on for almost as long as the First World War. I have been in operations where I have seen commanders burnt out after 9 months, to go for a number of years where you're effectively fighting 24/7. You don't get a break. As a commander, you don't have time for a break. They're probably surviving on 2, 3, maximum 4 hours sleep a night. This will break anyone. And actually, if we see what Zaluzhny achieved, he stopped Russia from capturing Kyiv. He pushed Russia back from large territories across Ukraine. He had then achieved what he needed to achieve. It was right and proper that General Syrsky came in and has been the architect of the transition of many of the Ukrainian forces from a static defence force to a manoeuvrist approach, and incorporated those changes with the technical changes that are coming in with the drone warfare and all the rest of it. But it's right and proper that before he gets overly tired, he steps back, and we then bring in a new, younger general who has got the ability to take the foundations that have been provided by his 2 predecessors and take those foundations and build on those for further successes in the conflict. And therefore, I do not see, and I think it is wrong to describe Syrsky and Zaluzhny as being sacked. They have achieved what they needed to achieve, and it's time for them to hand over and hand the mantle to the next person so that he's got the energy, the time, the vision and the understanding, as well as the support from elsewhere to take things forward.